Just what I need is another dirty saw to work on, but that's the job. This one here, the top end came apart, and of course the question always is when something like that happens, was there a leaky seal or something like that underneath? And usually the answer is yes. So what we're going to do today is basically pull this apart. This is a Stihl 461. I happen to really like these. People can have their own opinions, but this is one of the Stihls that I happen to like. It's been a little while since I've done one of these. That nice intake they have. Now, if you start looking at the things I have to go through on this as compared to like a 372, you're going to start understanding why some people prefer to work on Husqvarna. I remember hearing one guy try to convince me that the Stihl techs are better than Husqvarna techs. Of course, my first instinct was, yeah, because you gotta be. See, I don't remember that. Right there, see that? Like between the carburetor. I don't remember seeing that one at all. They have to get the plug out in order just to take the top cover off. So that doesn't look bad at all. And it doesn't look lean. So I'm wondering what happened. Check that out. It's one of the poly flywheels. I'm going to put this up to the camera so you can take note of how the wires went into the ignition with that one on top. And they'll unplug pretty quick. See how that black one is captured right there. Make sure you can see that. Alright. Also take note of how it comes through the case on that hole right there. See it? And that goes into where the handle is. It's going to be important on the reassembly of the saw. So let's see if we can get the cases out of the handle next. And just kind of leave that somewhat assembled. Just like with the Chinese variants, one of the reasons why you have to disassemble so much is in order to get the cylinder off, you've got to pull the carburetor and release impulse tube, and we also have to release the throttle. But unlike the Chinese ones, the materials they use here are actually quite good. So push the fuel line off. Here we go. Look at that. Here's that ring. You got to remember, you got both the outside ring and the inside ring, just like all the ones you know and love. Now I'm going to clean all this stuff up, so don't get excited. Now, for the most part, it should be free. So it should be free. Here's your tank handle. And I like the pulse line. It's really pretty cool. Alright, now we're getting down into my territory. But one of the things we're going to have to do, like it or not, pull apart all this stuff, you know, right before we get to the cases. I think that's a pretty cool compact package right there, don't you? I mean, now I'm liking it more. Once you get through the pain in the ass of getting down to this level, now it's just a chainsaw from this point on. This is like Husqvarna 372. You got your chain brake stuff there, you know, oil pump and all that right there. Everything's pretty much the same. So now I got to get that stuff off of there. Things like this washer right here, which captures the C-clip there. That's pretty whooped. It's pretty good, actually. Now when I put this back together, I'm not putting that back on. I'll let them do that part. Bearing looks good. Now this all is going to look pretty familiar. And like the flywheel where you have the internal thread with a puller, check that out. That's just like a 3/4 inch socket you can put on that to rattle that thing loose. Well, I forgot to put the camera on, but the worm gear comes out the normal way, and so does this clutch shield. You know, you can see where that runs on the inside where the worm gear is, right? You see that triangle shape right there? There's a circlip in there that keeps the worm gear from going further in. So I'm going to pull off the oil pump now. Start getting into the chain brake. Now some of this is a little different than the big 660s, but it's the same basic style. I don't know if that makes any sense. Back here is this little grommet right there, that grommet right there, and that oil line that goes into the bar oil tank. Those are things I have to get apart and off of there before I heat this case up, you know. And notice how that loop comes out from the center line of that versus off to the side. This is one of the things that I point out on the aftermarket saws. They're not nearly as well formed as these springs from OEM. Get one of these springs on your aftermarket kits and you'll be a happier person. Do not want to lose that circlip. And pay close attention to how that is hooked onto the chain brake band, right? And notice you have this one lever comes all the way through, goes up onto that. Then you got this little detent down here, and it can be pretty hard to put on. I'm going to leave it and hope it can stay right there. Let me put that screw right back in there so I don't lose it. See, I wouldn't put this much money into this saw right here based on the condition I'm seeing it. I mean, it's really a mess. You know what I find interesting is I only see 5 screws here. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Seems like both Husky and Stihl spent an awful lot of time trying to minimize the number of case screws they had. And with the Husqvarna 562, they got bit by doing that, you know. They ended up having to add a case screw. Now this is a little more compact, a little more simplistic. And they've obviously not had to do that, because these things have certainly lasted the test of time. But what I have to do now is see if I can find one of my circlip pliers and take the circlip here off the crank. And again, that's pretty much what keeps the worm gear from working its way into the seal. I think it's going to be funny to pull this cylinder off, and let's see what kind of gasket it has. If it's got one of those steel gaskets, let's see if the bubble up or the groove is up. I've always had the bubble turn up, the bump up. That top end isn't all that bad. It looks like it got some chips. Oh boy. I'm going to bet a bearing came apart. Look at all the flake and stuff alongside that piston. Well, I sent the circlip sailing. Put this little pick in there and bing! Off it went. So. Alright, it ran out of battery, but I don't know how much I got on film, but I split the cases with this. Pretty much the standard way the crank came out. This saw's got a lot of time on it. And one of the things I notice is if you look at that crank, that's a groove worn into that thing. You know, on the bearing seal, I don't know if that'll ever seal again. I'm probably going to end up having to try to crocus cloth it down. Same on the other side. You know? And what made the saw come to a stop is going to be very familiar to you. See all the balls will all run to one side there? Doesn't that kind of look like a 372 Husqvarna? Look at that thing wobbling there. Holy crow. And guess what? There's the flywheel side, and that's a nylon cage bearing. But not only is this a nylon cage bearing, but it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 balls. I would never, never, never put one of those back in. Unless I was told to, of course, which just means it came from the, warranty type work. And it's whooped too, that bearing is shot. But this right here is whooped. I'm going to see what I have for bearing options. I don't know if this, you got a crack in the case right here. I'm not particularly happy with what I see in here. No slop in that whatsoever. But the surfaces, there's a groove worn in there where the seal wore right into the crank. I just don't know if that'll ever seal again. So what did we end up with here? We ended up with a totally trashed bearing, right? Nylon cage bearing came apart just like we've seen so many times in the 372, so it's not unique to the Husqvarna brand. It should be takeaway to you guys who watch my videos. Now I have to tell you up front, I really like these darn 461s. And what it is, there's a difference between your opinion of a saw when you're working on it and you look at it from the inside out versus when you're operating it. So when I tell you that I like them, I really like to operate them. They're just a fun saw to run for me. And so I'm a fan, no doubt. From the design side, Stihl has a way of making things more complex. So they're harder to disassemble and reassemble than the Husqvarna brand, there's no doubt. The 562, in my mind, is the most complex of the Husqvarnas. 550, 562, that series. And they're about as difficult as the 461. But one of the things I want to point out is on the Husky, and you've seen this over and over again on 372, on so many of the different sizes we've run. They've got 6 screws in the case. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One over here. And that's enough, it works pretty good. Stihl's figured out how to get away with 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to be things like that that allow them to be a little bit lighter, So that's the question. When you have a spec sheet driven design, shooting for lightweight, where do you pick up the few ounces here and a few ounces there that end up being a pound? Well, you just saw one place. Less case screws. And the other place, it's got one less ball in that bearing than most of the other bearings. Of course, this one here has 8, one fragged. But look at that, it only has 7. Nice quality castings, no doubt. And these are pretty complex shapes. These are no longer simple shapes. So they've tried to make it as small and compact as possible. Fins in fin area. Look at the size of the fins on this saw as compared to, say, a 372. Let me get another cylinder. I'll put it side by side. So there's the fin area of the 461 versus an X-Torque, right? The cylinder is just simply bigger and heavier on this saw. That's not necessarily a good thing. Another thing to look at is the transfer ports. See how they come around? Has the same kind of a look and feel as the 576. And I would say that if you look at the size of the transfers on an old style 372, there's as much transfer area in one side of that old 372 as there in both sides for the 461. So to those people who think that bigger is better and more is better all the time, there's a cylinder right here for a 461, and that saw is strong. They are strong saws. And you can see the cross-sectional area of that transfer is not that big, is it? Just food for thought. Same with the intake. Oh, and another little thing is, see the dimpling on the inside of the intake boot there? Kind of hard to out-engineer the engineers. We know these saws are very strong. They're a great saw. Like I said, I really enjoy running these things. But that's telling you what they think about having polished surfaces to where they're flowing gas-air mix. So there's the metal gasket. So looks to me like the dimple was up and the groove was down, just like I do. So just some things for you to think about when you start listening to these guys online just mindlessly say, oh, this one's stronger than that one and this one's better built than that one. This is an efficient design, but there's not a lot of meat to spare, that's for damn sure. Of course, this one failed and has the same kind of a issue with heat, I suspect, on the nylon bearings as all the other brands that use the same kind of a concept, you know. But you need to look at it. You need to think about what you're looking at right there. Stihl MS461. See, when I get this thing running, I'm not going to give a crap about what's inside of it just as long as it keeps running. And I'm going to enjoy the fact that it's a light, fast, smooth, powerful saw. And I'll forget all about this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Right until it blows up again. Don't want too much, it'll flood up pretty darn quick. Yeah, carburetor's not pumping. Both this one and the Homelite have that as a common thing that happens. Now I think I had put a carb kit on this at one point in time. Fuel line looks pretty good. Sometimes you can just tap this and get it to go. A little rich. Air filter. Alright, let's tune it up just a little bit.